Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady. And in this video, I'm reviewing a BMW M2 CS. Now listen up, the CS, which stands for Club Sport, is the highest performing version of the very popular M2. BMW has decided to limit the CS to 500 units in the United States, and I believe about 2,000 worldwide, making this a very limited car by today's standards. Now, putting aside the limited factor of the CS, the M2 has won over a lot of enthusiasts because of its small packaging, great balance, and quite frankly, in my opinion, I think it reminds a lot of people of the E46 M3. Now, given that I've already driven the M2 competition, which is a fantastic car, I'm curious to find out if this sharper, more powerful, and obviously much more limited CS version is worth the extra $25,000. Now, since we're on the topic of price point, how about we also compare this to a car I also recently drove, the Porsche Cayman GT4. We're going to find out in this review of the BMW M2 CS. All right, so starting the review off by talking about the exterior design, and I'm mainly going to cover things that differentiate the CS from the regular competition model, starting off with this hood. Now, this piece is completely different. It is lighter and it also looks different. So let's start off with the lighter piece. This is a carbon fiber reinforced plastic hood, and it's 50% lighter than what you get in the competition model, so it helps bring down the weight of this CS. Next, the hood. It's very nicely done, actually. It has a lot of cuts and a lot of angles. Dare I say, the hood cowl or the power bulge reminds me a little bit of American cars, something I'm not really used to in European cars, but it looks good, and it has a heat extractor functionality venting here right underneath the power bulge, which has a dual purpose. Obviously, it is a heat extractor, and secondly, it provides aerodynamic efficiency and downforce for the front end of the car. It flows air through and on top to the roof. Next, let's talk about this color. It's called Misano Blue, and it looks stunning in person. It's actually one of the 4 color choices you have in the CS, so you're kind of limited there. You've got this Misano Blue, which I highly recommend. There's Hockenheim Silver, which also looks really good, and there's white mineral white and black sapphire. All right, next let's move to the rest of the front end, continuing with the kidney grills. Now, it's quite refreshing to see a proportionally sized kidney grill on a BMW, because nowadays that's becoming rare and rare with these humongous kidney grills that BMW is putting on their cars. Next, let's look at the headlights really quickly. You can see that they're the LED hexagonal shaped running lights. They look really cool during the day, they look really cool at night, and offer a nice evolution to the old school traditionalist angel eyes that you saw on older BMWs. Next, let's move down to the front bumper. It's exactly what you see in the competition model car. There's 3 air inlets. They're all functional, but the difference is underneath the skin. This has the cooling package from the M4 competition package car, because this has much more power than the competition M2. Next, and finally, the differentiating piece on the front end, besides the hood, there's a carbon fiber front splitter, which is entirely made of carbon fiber. But you're asking yourself, okay, Andy, then where the heck is it? Well, the owner decided to remove it to prevent scratches and to maintain the collectability of this car, because obviously it is limited. And in addition to that, the carbon fiber front splitter is actually very expensive. I looked it up, and the part is $2,300 without installation. So not that the M2 is a low stance car, it does have a decent clearance, but I don't blame the owner for removing it, considering the price and the limited production of this M2 CS. All right, so now you're looking at the side profile of the M2 CS, and one thing becomes really apparent when you look at it from this angle is the size of the M2. It's actually a pretty small car, and I would say it's practically the same size as the Porsche Cayman GT4 that I drove recently, but that's one of the things that people like about it is how small of a car it is. Cars nowadays are getting so much bigger, and it's refreshing to see a car of this size, or at least a sports car of this size. Next, let's talk about the exterior and the addition of all the carbon fiber that BMW has put into this M2 CS. So like I mentioned, the front splitter is carbon fiber, the hood is carbon fiber reinforced plastic, the mirror caps are carbon fiber. And as a side note, remember when the original M2 came out, it didn't have the M mirrors and everybody went crazy? Well, you don't have that problem here. The CS has the proper M2 mirrors. And then you've got the carbon fiber roof. Now, the carbon fiber roof looks absolutely stunning. It's different than any other carbon fiber roof I've seen, specifically related to the pattern. The checkers are much bigger. They look really, really nice. Now, people have complained that the roof has some defects as far as the weave goes, but when I look at this example, I don't really see any issues. Next, you've got more carbon fiber on the gurney flap. Going down to the exhaust section, you have a carbon fiber diffuser, and to cap it all off, you have more carbon fiber on the interior, which I will cover once I get to that portion. But BMW made it very clear, or at least to me, that they really wanted to visually distinguish the CS using more carbon fiber, and obviously the use of carbon fiber brings down the weight of the CS. All right, now let's talk about the wheels, tires, and brakes for the CS, because there are some differences here, starting off with the suspension. This has a standard adaptive suspension, something that you do not have an option for on the competition model car. Next, let's move to the wheels. These are unique, lightweight forged wheels. They're model 763 in the BMW wheel lineup. They have 19 inches by 9 in the front, 19 by 10 in the rear, and you have two flavors as far as your color goes. You have this gloss black that you see here, and also you have a satin gold, which I would be really interested to see how that looks against this Misano blue paint. Anyway, it's a really cool looking wheel. I like it a lot. Next, let's move to the tires. They're a Michelin Pilot Super Sport tire, 245 in the front, 265 in the rear. I am going to ding BMW here because I was hoping they would give the rear a little bit more meat. 265 is practically the same size that you see in the competition model, but this has so much more power than that. And the common complaint that I've read about is that this needs a little bit more traction, and bigger tires back there might have helped. Next, let's move to the inside the wheel barrel. The brakes are absolutely huge. They're ventilated disc brakes. They're 15.96 inches, so almost a 16-inch brake in the front, and in the rear 14.75. 6-piston M caliper in the front, 4-piston end caliper in the rear, and the fact that the M caliper is painted in red really gives it a nice contrast with the black wheel. Overall, I wish, like I said, it did have a little bit more tire in the back, but the wheel, tire, and brake combination is pretty strong here in the M2. All right, now let's move to the rear end of the M2 CS. A couple things different back here compared to the competition model. Starting off with this rear spoiler or gurney flap, whatever you want to call it. I think it looks really nice. It's made of carbon fiber and provides a great contrast to this Misano blue paint. It's mounted rather aggressively, specifically to the angle, but it's not too aggressive and over the top like you see in some aftermarket things where they're really, really high or stick out really far out. I think this is really good. It's well executed. Then obviously you have the M2 CS badge as opposed to a M2 competition badge. Next, moving to the trunk, and this is one really, really annoying thing about the M2 CS, and that is that it does not have remote keyless entry. So if the doors are locked, I do not have the ability to walk up to the door and just pull on the door handle and get in. Same thing goes for the trunk. I actually have to take the key out, push a button so it unlocks the door, pull the handle out. I know I'm crying a river here, especially considering that people used keys before, but nowadays remote keyless entry is almost like a must. You find it in the most economical brands, and it's a really good convenience feature, if I have to be honest. All right, so let's talk about this trunk. Of course, I do have to push down a button for it to open, and when I do open it, I am greeted with a very nice amount of space. It's actually quite substantial. I could see you easily putting two larger size suitcases in here, but for sure at least one large size suitcase and maybe a couple duffel bags. But you should not have any issues taking this on a weekend getaway or even daily driving it. It actually reminds me a lot of my E46 M3 trunk. I would say it's actually the same size, if not bigger. And as far as closing the trunk, of course, disappointed again, much like most manufacturers, there is no grab handle to close it, so I do have to put my palm onto the paint to close it, and nothing really special there. All right, now let's talk about the rest of the rear end. There really isn't much difference between the competition model and the M2 CS as far as up here, the taillights, all this stuff is the same. The differences are down here in the exhaust. Now, the diffuser around the exhaust, this is completely different. This is made of carbon fiber. It looks really cool. It's rather aggressive. It's not over the top, but it is definitely noticeably more aggressive than what you see in the competition model. And the exhaust is the M Sport tuned exhaust. It does have the M logos on top of the tips. It's a quad tip, even though this is a single can style muffler. And BMW continues to baffle everybody by making the can of the exhaust very visible from the rear. This is something that I continuously scratch my head on why BMW doesn't improve this. But anyway, they continue to do it. Maybe some of the owners actually like it. But beyond that, let's take a listen to what the exhaust sounds like. All right, now let's talk about the engine details of this M2 CS. And as I lift the hood here, it's really light. And of course, this is the benefit of having it be made of carbon fiber reinforced plastic, and it looks really cool when you lift the hood up. Next, let's talk about the engine. So this is the infamous 3-liter inline 6-cylinder from BMW. Of course, it's turbocharged, making 444 horsepower, which is up 39 horsepower compared to the M2 competition. The torque remains the same at 406. As far as the red line, 7,600, which is remarkable considering that this is a forced induction car. Typically, when you got close to 8,000 RPM, you would have to go naturally aspirated, but manufacturers are doing such a fantastic job now with forced induction and increasing efficiency, but maintaining some of the rev or high RPM nature of a naturally aspirated engine in a forced induction engine. As far as transmission option goes, you have a 7-speed double clutch transmission and then a 6-speed manual. BMW continues to be one of the manufacturers that offers a manual transmission, which is absolutely fantastic. 0 to 60 times, 3.8 seconds for the DCT, 4 seconds flat, which is pretty fast considering the manual transmission. And then as far as the weight goes, this car weighs 3,500 pounds. Now that is about 100 pounds less than the competition model car, which is pretty drastic. 100 pounds less is a big difference when you compare it to weight, 3,600 to 3,500. Now, what does all of this mean? The extra power, the double clutch, the lighter weight, 10 seconds faster on the Nürburgring lap time, 7-minute 52-second for the competition, 7-minute 42-second for the CS. As far as the engine design goes, you do have a carbon fiber structural brace that you see in most M cars. It looks really nice. You do have the plastic M Power engine cover here and the intercooler or the intake manifold for the engine. So it's not the best, it's not the worst. It looks typical BMW M. All right, so now the interior portion of the review for the M2 CS, and this is widely the same interior as what you see in the M2 competition, but there are some differences. This is a Alcantara carbon fiber red stitching leather interior. So let me jump into the differences or the features here. First things first, the door panel is a mixture of Alcantara, leather, and carbon fiber. I like how the door handle is carbon fiber. It feels nice when you touch it. As far as the seat goes, this is a comfortable seat. It is a mixture of carbon fiber, Alcantara, red stitching. It does have plenty of adjustability, the normal forwards, backwards, all of that stuff. The bolstering is adjustable. I personally like it in its deflated setting. When you inflate it, it gets really, really tight, especially for somebody my body size. As far as the comfort goes, it's a pretty comfortable seat. I can't say it has like the softest cushions or anything, but it does a good job of softening up the ride or the stiff ride that the M2 CS has. Now let's move to the steering wheel. If you are a fan of thick steering wheels, you will absolutely love this thing. It's girthy, it's thick, it has the M cross stitching for the Alcantara, so it looks really cool. It's not the smallest diameter, it's actually pretty big, but it does still feel sporty. You do have paddle shifters, you do have the multi-control buttons, you have the M1 and M2 that allow you to tailor specific modes like your steering, suspension, throttle response into just one button, so you just set that and you just forget it. But overall, the steering wheel is actually pretty good. Then we move to the gauges. Now, BMW had me fooled. I thought this was a LCD gauge cluster, but it's not. It's an analog gauge cluster. You have a traditional speed and tachometer, speedometer, tachometer, and everything else is analog, but they hide it or disguise it so well. The needle and the gauges look LCD, but they're just lit up in the background, and they certainly fooled me until I took a closer look. But nonetheless, they look very cool. They're very clear to read. Then let's come over to the center section here. One differentiating piece is this dash panel here that's in Alcantara. It does have the CS logo that gives it that cool or distinguishing look compared to the non-CS model. But as far as the center stack goes, the infotainment is an 8.8-inch screen. It's the same thing that you saw in prior generations of BMWs. And then let's come down to a really interesting part, probably the most interesting part of the CS interior, and that's this center console. You can see that it's all carbon fiber, and this is really functional because BMW says they save 6 pounds when they go to this center section being carbon fiber as opposed to leather and all this extra material to make it fancier, because of course the nature of this car is to be more sporty, to be lighter, and why not do that in here with the carbon fiber to functionally improve dynamics, and it actually looks cooler as well. Now the downside of this is you lose your armrest. You do not have an armrest in this car, no center storage section for you, but there is an exposed USB outlet that you can plug in your phone and charge it and have the Apple CarPlay feature. Now let's come back up to the transmission. This is the DCT. So the way it operates, foot on the brake, you push it once to the right, that puts you in drive. Push it again to the right, that'll put you in sport mode. Flick it to the left, that puts you in neutral. Flick it all the way to the left. Hold it all the way to the left, push it up, that puts you into reverse. Now, as far as parking it, you cannot leave this in neutral and turn the car off. The car will alert you that you're in neutral and you can't turn the car off, or you can't walk away. So you leave it in D, and then you push the start stop button, and that will put you in park automatically. Then you've got a row of performance buttons here. The top one is the traction control, and then you have the throttle response and the suspension and the steering. All three of these modes have Comfort, Sport, and Sport Plus. And then you have the parking button, and down here underneath the transmission selector, you have a button that controls how aggressive the shifts are. Then you have the iDrive controller, which is standard older generation. I do like the older generation though, because it has the individual buttons compared to nowadays where you have like a flat panel and all the buttons are shared, and it doesn't feel as intuitive as this older generation does. But overall, the interior, I do like the size. I don't think it's too small. I think it's just the right size for a two-door car. As far as the materials, the things, the overall quality and the look, the aesthetics, BMW tried to spice it up with the carbon fiber and the Alcantara and the red stitching, but it is showing its age. This center stack has got to be at least 5-6 years old. The radio buttons and all that stuff is looking kind of old. So considering that this is a sports car, maybe some people will overlook that and just look at the performance, which is what you're really supposed to do. But nowadays, all of this stuff becomes important. The interior, the exterior, the performance, all of that ties together, especially considering the price of this car. But that's pretty much my overall thoughts on the interior. Now let's go to the driving portion of the review. All right, now the interior portion of the review, and as always, showing you what the key looks like. It's just a regular key. Literally, you would not be able to distinguish this key from like a bare bones 3 Series key from the same generation or the prior generation. So I'm kind of disappointed. It doesn't even have like an M badge or M coloring. There's literally nothing to tell you that this is not a 228i key. So come on, BMW, give me a better key at least. Next, moving to the visibility, out the front, it's absolutely fantastic. There's nothing to worry about here. European cars typically have good outward visibility, at least forward outward visibility. And out the side, it's no different. I don't have any issues as far as blind spots and things like that because there are window cutouts for the back seats. And even though this car does not have any blind spot monitoring and things like that, I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. It does have a backup camera, which of course most cars have nowadays, and rear parking sensors. So you do have that coverage back there. But overall, the visibility is actually really good. Next, as far as price goes, this is a base price of $83,600, which represents roughly $25,000 more than a regular M2 competition regular, of course. But I don't know, guys, $83,000 for this M2 CS. Let's see if it's worth it. Let's turn it on and let's go for a drive. All right, so let's go ahead and turn this thing on, foot on the brake, power start. The exhaust at startup kind of sounds exactly the same as what you get in the competition car. So let's go ahead and put the seatbelt on. And the first thing I want to talk about, let me turn the AC on. The first thing I want to talk about is the transmission engagement, whether in drive or in reverse. This thing kind of feels a little jerky at initial contact or initial engagement of the throttle. That's at least what I noticed. So right now I'm in neutral. I'll put it in reverse, and if I immediately press on, it just kind of jerks for a second. Let me see if I can do it a little bit better in drive. So now I'm in drive. See, oh, there it goes. Now it feels like the engagement of it is a little slow, and if you're not I guess tapered with your throttle when it's trying to get engaged, once it gets engaged, then you just kind of like jerk for a second. So be sensitive with your throttle once if you're switching between gears and you're letting the car get in gear. So that's the first thing I can say. Now let's get out of this parking lot. Let's give it some gas. It's pretty quick. It's definitely very quick. The engine buildup, I was actually taking off from second gear there. Let me get into first and experience it from that. All right, let's get out of this street. All right, here we go. First gear. Let's go. Traction. Bangs right into the gear. It really bangs into the gear, man. That's a, I guess, pretty satisfying transmission shift. Let's do it again. First to the floor, a little bit of lag. Straight line speed is good. It's not the fastest car. The brakes, oh wow, these brakes are really good. Let's do it again. First gear, actually, you know what? I'm gonna put it in sport mode for the throttle response. Let me see if that'll improve the turbo lag a little bit. So foot to the floor. A little bit better. There, you definitely need to engage launch control or else you're gonna feel the turbo lag. And it does need a little bit more tire in the back. I can feel it kind of, the tires are looking for more grip. It needs a little bit more tire, and it's true what the reviewers are saying about it. It's definitely quick. Oh man, the Sport Plus makes a difference. Of course, when you're going, but at initial contact of the throttle, it's not that big of a difference, to be honest. But when you're going, man, it really gets sensitive, and you can feel the difference of the throttle response in Sport Plus mode. It's getting really hot in here. All right, so I'm gonna put it back in normal mode and tell you a little bit about the rest of this car. Shift by itself. The transmission is actually really, really good. Besides that initial weird engagement where it jerks for a second, but overall it's actually really good. On upshifts and on downshifts, it shifts very, very smoothly. The paddle shifters are extremely responsive. When it bangs into gear, it really bangs. It's a very audible transmission. This reminds me a little bit of the Nissan GT-R's double clutch, where it's very mechanical sounding. You can really hear everything in the transmission, and especially during the gear shifts. The brake pedal, much like I remember my E46 M3 when I first got it new, it has a very sensitive throttle, brake pedal. It's engagement at the top of the pedal. The bite right at the top is very satisfying. You really don't have to like push on the pedal to get a lot of brake feel or a lot of brake power. So let's give it another go. So downshifts, and there's definitely, the turbo lag is definitely there. By the time the transmission downshifts and the turbo spool, it takes a second, and I'm in the fastest shifting. Let me go into fastest shifting mode. Let's see if it makes a difference. Okay, I'm in second now. Let's see. Now downshifted to first. Now, like I'm going now. Like I really feel now I'm going. So there's definitely turbo lag. There's definitely some issues, I would say, off the line. Not issues, but it's not the fastest off the line. Okay, now back into D. So as far as the suspension goes, I mean, I'm kind of driving around in the city here, so I'm not really going to be able to give you this whole mountainous view of me driving. But I did take it on a little bit of a drive, and I can tell you that this car corners very well. It does have good feel. The suspension does get very artificially weighty, if that's a term. So I prefer to leave it in comfort. Let me see, was it comfort? Yes, I do like it in comfort. The most I will put it in is sport. Otherwise, it just gets way too artificial and way too, like, it feels like a rubber band, I guess, for the lack of a better term. But overall, the steering is actually pretty good. The suspension corners really, really flat. I like the way this car handles a lot. It does inspire confidence. The one thing I do think that it is lacking is that rear tire. It needs a little bit more tire in the back. But otherwise, from a performance standpoint, it's really, really good. It feels great. Now, does it feel so much faster and so much better than a competition pack car or a competition model car? Not really. At least I couldn't tell. This car, you're gonna buy it for the limitedness, the limited production, the looks, all the carbon fiber, all that stuff. But otherwise, for $25,000, I don't know, guys. It's going to be tough. You really have to be a BMW fan and somebody who's looking to collect something like this to appreciate an $83,000 M2 CS compared to like a $50,000 or $60,000 M2 competition. But otherwise, this is a fantastic car. I think it performs really well. How does it perform compared to a Cayman GT4? I would take the Cayman. That motor in that Cayman GT4 is so special, the 4-liter. This 3-liter just doesn't, I don't know, it just falls short. There's nothing taken away from this, but man, the 4-liter in the GT4 is one of my favorite experiences. As far as daily drivability goes and stiffness, it's pretty good. Let me give it some more gas. I'm just driving. Let me give it some gas. Wow, that's a big number. That was pretty big. It hides the speed very well. Like I said, it is confidence inspiring. As far as daily drivability goes, I wouldn't have any issues daily driving this car. The transmission is smooth. The suspension is stiff. You are in an M car. Of course, even further, you're in an M2 CS, the club sport, so it's much stiffer. But the seats do a good job of cushioning the stiffness of the suspension, if that makes any sense. And I don't see any issues with daily driving this. So overall, is this a good car? Yes, I think it performs really, really well. And the downside, of course, is the price and some of the interior and things like that. So if you're willing to ignore some of those things and you're willing to put up with the $82,000, $83,000 price point, then this is a fantastic M car. But that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, please send me a comment down below or DM me on Instagram at DriveSteady. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.